Hello and welcome back to another video. Sorry if I look dishevelled. I've been out, I've started pulling my annual plants up today, and I've been out gardening, and because it speaks of 3 or 4 wet days coming and another storm, and I thought I'd start getting a bit tidied up, ready to get some of these spring bedding and bulbs set out. But this video isn't about that. You know, sadly, another season has gone by. I did speak earlier on, if you regularly watch my videos, or if you just come along into this video and having a look at this video, you won't know. But I've been pushing now for many years, I think since about 2010, for our local parish council to try and find a site to get some allotments. And to be absolutely honest, I've finally come to the conclusion, it did look quite hopeful in the spring, I have to say. And you know, there is a site investigation of a piece of land going on, but I've come to the conclusion it's never going to be really viable. I did offer my services to some parish councillors. I've had experience. I actually helped run a field allotment site in the past, and they never bothered even to contact me. And you know, our parish council, well, you know, they do their best, and it's a difficult job at the best of time. But you know, the bit of ground that they're looking at and exploring, to my mind, is just a total non-starter. We might in time, it is public ground, we might in time go and have a walk on it, and I'll talk more about that and show you the actual site and the difficulties. But this video really isn't about that. You know, there must be many people like me frustrated that here we are living in the UK, and my question in here is, you know, as UK residents, no matter who you are, what you do, where you live in the UK, but should you have some right of access to some land if you want to grow your own produce on? Successive governments don't seem to bother about this. You know, here we are having a so-called cost of living crisis. You know, successive governments have wasted billions of pounds again on other issues that I think is just a total waste. And yet, you know, so many people could, if they did so want, and you can't force people to do that, you know, but you could be growing a lot of, particularly, you know, from spring into early autumn, growing a lot of your own vegetables and food, basically. But there's no directive really from anyone in the government, or, you know, any pressure put on local councils and then parish councils. You know, it seems that they just basically go through the motions, and if, I think back in 2010, if there were 20 of us that put our names down on a list, on a kind of petition, and gave it to the parish council, that forced their hand, that they had to look in the locality for some suitable land. But if they couldn't find anything suitable, then that's as much as they can do. They obviously haven't got powers to compulsory purchase or say, you know, we want that land. I truly think this is a difficult issue, and I think it affects probably more people like me that live in rural areas. We did have some allotments in this village many years ago, and in the night after the Second World War, when we had a huge house building programme, the allotments were built on for social housing, which I kind of, you know, kind of see that, and we needed housing after the Second World War, and you know, they were houses that were let out by our local council, so that was good. Unfortunately, since that period of time, all those houses have been sold off into private hands, and I don't think there's hardly any of them actually now that are, you know, termed as social council housing, which is woefully, you know, when we need it. So our allotments went in the 1950s. There was no replacements given at that particular time. I suppose, you know, there again, by the sort of late 1950s into the early 60s, food was getting cheaper. You know, supermarkets had started springing up in our local town, and you know, a lot of the village houses had big gardens in those days anyway. But then, you know, by the later mid-60s on into the 70s, a lot of new housing estates were built with very small, very average, so probably bigger than average gardens today now, but you haven't got the room to grow what I call proper vegetables, you know. And I'm not one of these sort of people that can faff about in these raised beds or have things grow vegetables in pots. Sure, that might be your thing and that's fine, you know, you might do it very successfully. But, you know, having had, I've never talked about my allotments before, so I don't, obviously, if this video gets too long, I shall have to do this over a period of videos. But in the early 90s, I'm not going to say I had a breakdown, because I think we overuse that word again, don't we? But I was working in construction, and over a period of 9 months, I was working for 3 companies, and the first one went bust, and I got another job working for another company. Several months later, that went bust, and I got another, what I thought was a really good job with a really promising up-and-coming company, but then sadly that also failed. Not down to me, I was just an employee doing my job, you know. There was a bit of a recession, we didn't sell any houses for a long period of time, particularly in that last company, and I just, you know, after that period of time, over that sort of 18 months, and have lost, you know, to be out of business with companies 3 times, and obviously, you know, I was self-employed anyway, so you don't get any redundancy or anything. So I thought, blow, you know, I'm going to do little bits and pieces myself, which I started doing at that particular time, and lo and behold, on the television, in Gardener's World in those days, was the late great Jeff Hamilton from Barnsdale.
I've always found it extremely difficult to germinate impatiens until last year when we discovered this way. Now, the reason why they're difficult is because they want constant moisture and also light in order to germinate them. And the way to achieve that is, instead of sprinkling the seed over the top, to make some little furrows in the compost and sow your seeds in the bottom of those furrows, and then to cover them with a little bit of vermiculite. You can buy that in the garden centre. That will make sure that they're nice and moist, and also the light will go through vermiculite, so they germinate quite well, as you can see.
And he popped up one Friday night and said, do you gardeners realise in your area there's probably hundreds of vacant allotment plots? He said, I urge you, if you want an allotment, go and see, get out there and see what's available. Well, obviously there wasn't any in our village, but living quite close to a town, I decided to inquire, and about 5 miles away, there was a huge, great field site of allotment plots. I think in total there had been about 800 plots when it was handed over from the Development Corporation. The town where I lived near was expanded in the 1970s, and it had a Development Corporation, and a lot of new houses were built. and so they allocated this space as allotments. This was my side of the town, but it was still 5 miles away, which at that particular time didn't seem an issue. You know, I had access to a vehicle, and I also used to cycle, which was fine. I took a plot. It was in a wilderness. It was grass as high as that, and I took one plot, a 10-pole plot, which is quite a big area. That's about 250 square metres, I believe, and that's really, why are allotments 10 poles? Well, that's roughly what it was thought, and this probably was thought many years ago, I have to say, but that was roughly thought what you could feed a family of 4 on growing vegetables. So as you can see, it's quite a, I think it's about the size of, is it 2 double tennis courts? I might have told you that wrong, but it's a big area. So there I was in the summer. Those early summers of the 90s were quite hot and dry, and I arrived on this, I was told, you know, in fact, there was no numbers. The guy from the council, who was the allotment officer, had to come and show me roughly where the boundary was. The ground had been ploughed a few years prior, so it has all got horrible ridges and furrows that you could fall down into, and of course the grass had grown up this high as well. And I started digging this, you know, I started clearing it. I cut the grass down, you know, got that cleared up, you know, didn't have any power tools at that time. You know, I think I'd got like a hook scythe, an old slasher, like hedging tool, and because some of it had got quite thick, you know, bramble and sort of even like bits of brush, and as well as thick grass. And I cut the grass and then would turn a bit over and sort of really quite, you know, just turn the soil over. And I did this on and off all that summer. And by the early autumn, I'd got the whole plot just loosely turned over. And, you know, on the way, I'd tried to pull as much of the couch grass out as I could, and any, you know, like docks and pernicious weeds that have got roots that will come back. And I thought, right, yeah, we'll leave that. And luckily, it came wet that autumn, and this soil was quite light and sandy on top. It came wet. Then we did have a little bit of cold weather, you know, and by sort of middle of February, early March, but that sort of period, you know, I was amazed. I was able to start really cultivating this, you know, bare earth. It had broke down quite nicely. I hadn't got a lot of weed growth coming back through because I'd, you know, at that particular point in very early spring, I'd kept on top of it. And I started to cultivate, you know, and that year, on that one plot, I grew an awful lot of potatoes and all the things that you might, you know, did so wish to grow on an allotment. And, you know, I could see it was really good soil, nice to work. The only problem is it did dry out a bit, being quite light and sandy, but that's by the by. And, you know, I got really into this, and the allotment guy came out one day, and I was working on the plot, who worked for the council, and he said, "Ma," he said, you're making a cracking job of that." He said, "Would you like to take the one next door to you?" He said, "I'll give it to you rent-free for sort of 18 months if you're prepared to take another one on." Because he'd given me this one rent-free for 12 months. I think the rent then was £20 a plot you paid. And I said, "Yeah." I said, 18 months rent-free? He said, "Yeah." So I took the next door plot as well. And did the same thing. I was working the plot that I'd got started and got that cultivated and growing. Then any spare time, I'd go and turn this, cut the grass down, do the identical thing, and turn this plot over. And left it, you know, over winter. by the next spring, it was beautiful again. You know, I'd got 2 growing plots now. And and I still hadn't, at that particular point in time, I still hadn't paid any rent on this ground. You know, obviously the first one was coming up now for that year to be paid £20. He was a very nice guy, and he came out again one day. I think it was, you know, late spring, early summer, and he said, "My," he said, "you've done well." He said, "You got 2 cracking plots there now," and he said, "Would you like the one the other side of you?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." I said, a guy called, his first name was John. I said, "I don't really know John." You know, I was on first name terms with him by that time because he used to call round occasionally. And I said, "I don't really know John." You know, I said, "You know, I think I've got more than enough." He said, "Well," he said, "have a think about it." He said, I'll do the sell." He said, "I'll do the same deal for you." In fact, he said, "No," he said, as this one was a bit rougher, because it seemed many years since that side of me, the other side, had been worked. He said, "I'll do an even better deal." He said, "I'll go 2 years rent-free on that if you want to take it on." And I got home and I thought about it, and obviously this was pre-emails or even you know, I don't think I'd even got a mobile phone at that particular time. And I thought, yeah, you know what, I'm going to have a go for this. And I remember phoning him up, and that's what we did. So by that time I had 3 10-pole allotments, and my goodness, you know, I was more, at that particular time, I was more than self-sufficient. You know, one year I think I set virtually the whole of, I have to just clear the ground and then, you know, set, you know, anything that was good at ground clearing, or keeping ground clear, I should say, of weeds. So potatoes are really good at that. You perhaps don't get a huge crop, depending on how you water or how much rain you get. And I think one year, the second or third year, I planted the whole of one plot as potatoes, and I think it's the first and the only ever time I grew enough potatoes to last right from early potatoes right through, and I stored them in, obviously lifted them and stored them as you do in paper sacks in the cool garage here at home, and we lasted right through the whole winter with our own potatoes. Obviously, you know, I changed things about then, that was early days. But anyway, so, you know, that's how I got into allotments, and, you know, my start of, you know, my allotmenteering, if you want, for better words. As I say, sadly, and then I was working in a job that really needed a heck of a lot of commitment, and the travelling of 5 miles there and 5 miles back, it doesn't seem far, 5 miles, but it can be a pain, you know, when you, I think I've tried to say this, there was another guy on YouTube that was looking for land who wanted to grow vegetables, and he was looking crazy distances from where he lived. And I said, you know, I don't want to sound as I'm a know-it-all, because I'm not, because there's so much I don't know about gardening still, but I said, don't even contemplate. I said, if you want to buy some land and put trees on it or something like that, fine. Just go and sit there in your camper van, that's okay. But I said, growing vegetables in the spring and summer, you've virtually got to go to your allotment every day or every other day if it's going to need watering. At our allotments, we had big water troughs that filled up, and you could dip a can in and take as much, and we had one of those on the bottom of that where my plot was. You couldn't use hoses weren't allowed, but you could take as much water out of the water trough as you did so wish, so you could water things very well. As I say, because that's the only downside, it was quite sandy soil over there. But if you're travelling or having to travel, you know, and you've got other work commitments and things like that, you can soon, lose the plot or lose crops very easily. And 5 miles, it got to the stage where I thought, no, working as I was then, I was working back full time in a more of a regular type job, and it got too much to try to do it. Had that ground been where I live, and say in a short walk or a short cycle ride from where I lived, I could have probably kept it going, but that was just too far, sadly. So I ended up giving the plots up before they got too overgrown, rather than let somebody take them over as they were in good condition. And ever since then, I've been pushing to try and get some allotments in our village, but I don't think that is ever going to happen, sadly. After I've seen this debacle of how they're going on with this field site that they're looking at the moment in time, and I don't think they realise what it entails and the cost that it would be to make that site into proper, decent allotment plots. So I think in rural areas we have suffered more. I had a quick glance today, and Birmingham City. If you live in Birmingham City, that's apparently Birmingham has got one of the biggest number of allotment plots in any city in the UK. And I don't know whether there's a waiting list. There probably is a waiting list on some sites, as there is all over the country now for allotments, because it's become so popular again, or was a few years ago. I think to myself, if I lived in a city, I could probably get an allotment, whereas because I live in the country, I can't. I've got 300 acres of grass meadowland at the back of me, which is rough grazed by sheep, and I think I can grow. It's the same soil as I grow in the garden, basically. It's not been worked, I know, so it would take a bit of cultivation, but I think it seems so unfair in this country that we aren't or don't have rights to any land. I don't know how that would work. We can't. I realise we can't all take spades and start digging meadow land up. That just wouldn't work. But I do feel there is a need that if people want to do something like this, there should be as much help out there to try and achieve it, rather than these half-hearted, more hindrance measures like our parish council is doing, just to try and keep people happy and say, well, we are looking at this, we are going to try and do this, when seriously they've got no idea or any inclination that would work where they're trying to do it. Obviously, the other option is, well, could you buy some land? Well, land at the moment in time, agricultural land I'm talking about now, has reached an all-time high. It seems, that people think it's a good investment, as it probably has been or is still, and the average over the country for 1 acre of agricultural land is about £12,500 an acre. Now, sure, an acre would make you a lovely big vegetable garden, I know, but seriously, £12,500 would buy me an awful lot of vegetables at Tesco or wherever you're shopping, at Sainsbury's or Aldi or Asda or wherever you go shopping, or at greengrocers, if you are still lucky enough to have independent greengrocers. £12,500 would buy you a hell of a lot of vegetables, wouldn't it? If you are interested in it, if I've inspired you to think about an allotment, have a look what's available in your area, because you might be surprised. You might have to go on a waiting list. I do understand that they are popular in some parts of the country, and you have to go on a waiting list, but definitely worth it. Well, I've rambled on quite enough for this video, so as always, thanks very much for watching. Do comment your thoughts on you know, should our local councils have more power to grant, you know, just us ordinary people land and allotment plots? What do you think? Have you any experience? As always, thank you for watching, and thank you for the new subscribers, and wherever you are in the world, good gardening, and I'll catch up with you very soon again. Until that point in time, my best wishes and bye for now.